Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's Richard here. Thanks very much for coming back to join me. I did a video a little while ago that talked about the importance of understanding yourselves, understanding the people in your team, and the possibility of using profiling tools to do that. And I got asked a question in the comments about some of the tools that I've seen used and also how you can use those to understand individuals within the team or yourselves indeed, and how you can use those to understand your team as a whole. And I've used a few tools, and there's many tools out there. I've used a few. I've used them personally. I've used them with clients, and they are very useful. So I'll give a bit more detail here and a bit more of a rundown, and then in future videos I'll perhaps go into a bit of detail on specific tools and what they're used for and their benefits and drawbacks. First thing to remember is you can use these tools. Most of them will give you an individual profile. So if it's you doing it for yourselves or members of your team doing it for themselves, it gives them another level of understanding about who they are, about aspects of their personality, about the ways in which they perform under certain conditions. So it's really useful for individuals. You can use that just as a tool to help people with their own development. You can build that into conversations around professional development with your team, looking at people's profile and thinking, well, okay, so you're clearly somebody who's let's say, a strategic thinker. So maybe a role that suits that kind of thinking better would suit that person. They are tools, and it's that kind of thinking that they can help you to do with your team, with members of your team, when you're working with them on their professional development, let's say. They are really useful if you have a team and you get everybody to do their profile. You can then, with most tools, you can then look at the mix of the team you've got and see what different profiles you have. And that's very useful. In fact, some of the tools in particular are excellent in that that's what they're designed to do, or partly what they're designed to do is give you an individual profile and then show you a map of your team as a whole. And I'll talk about some of those in a moment. So again, if you're doing it as a team, you get your individual profile. That's useful for you. That's useful for each individual that you work with. If you can plot your profile in a way that tool allows you to do, it can show you where you've got gaps. It can show you so we have a lot of detail thinkers in this team, for example, or we have a lot of people who are very team focused, for example. None of those things are bad in and of themselves, but it can show you, okay, we're very heavily biased towards detail thinkers, let's say. So we either need to perhaps look for someone, if we need someone that's more of a strategic thinker, or we just need to push ourselves a little bit harder, learn some skills that help us to have that big picture ability as well as our expertise in detail. It can help you to get the right mix. As I said, if you've got a definite gap in the team and you think, actually, we could do with someone who has that skill set, well, then it allows you to look for that. It's worth saying that these tools are only ever a guide. They give you information about yourself or about team members on the day that they filled in the profiling tool questionnaire. Very often they use a questionnaire, something fairly simple to derive the information from. And they're very clever in that from that small amount of information, they can draw up an accurate profile of that person. But it won't tell you everything about that person. It'll tell you about the aspects of their character or personality that system tests. So they're certainly not something to use in recruitment as the basis for hiring or firing or selecting people, but they can be useful to help you just have a little bit more understanding about a person or about the makeup of your team. So I would always say that they are just a guide. They're a tool. They provide some additional information that you can use in a team session, in thinking about the best profile of a team for a given client. But what they do really well is exactly that. They help you to think in another direction. They help you to think in a direction that maybe you hadn't thought of before. Let's say you're putting a team up in front of a client for a presentation, for an interview. Typically, we would select people, certainly in the technical industries I'm used to working with, on technical skill. We would want certain technical skills in front of the client. And that's absolutely right. Of course you do. You're going there to showcase how good you are at things. But maybe you also need to think about, well, do we need someone in there who's a really confident presenter, a networker, somebody who doesn't just think about detail, who can think it broadly, or who has that greater emotional intelligence to be a generalist in the room? And that can be a really useful set of skills in front of a client. And I just use that as an example. But it's a good example I've experienced myself, where it's good to have someone in there who has that, and some of the profiling tools will test for this, that more outgoing, extroverted personality who can engage the client, who can get the mood in the room right, who can create a warm atmosphere, get people listening, and then hand it over to the people who are the real detailed experts to talk to the client about the way in which you can help. I've seen that work really, really well. But they are just a guide. They're a tool in your toolbox, the same as any other tool that you would use in the course of your work. The ones I particularly like, or the ones I've experienced a lot of, are things like Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is very good. It gets a bit of stick because it's not terribly based in science. It's based in more Jungian philosophy. Quite an old system from the early part of the 20th century. But for all that, it has endured. It's quite detailed. I think it's very good. I think Myers-Briggs is very good, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on a separate video. If you want to try Myers-Briggs, I have no affiliation with this organisation whatsoever, but 16personalities.com, that's 16personalities.com, is a website you can go to and do a free, I don't think they call it a Myers-Briggs, maybe they're not allowed to, but it's the Myers-Briggs system. You can go and do a free profile on their website, and it gives you heaps of information about you, and if you do it for your colleagues, about them as well. Belbin is another one. Belbin Team Roles, a great tool. As the name suggests, yes, it gives you an individual profile, but it's your profile as you work in a team. It shows you the strengths that you have when working in a team. It also talks about, I'll come back to this in a minute, but what they call allowable weaknesses, where with every set of skills that you have, with every personality profile, if you do it into overdrive, sometimes it becomes a negative or a weakness. So there are certain allowable weaknesses within the Belbin team, which you kind of have to put up with individual people, because they're actually where their strengths sit. Strength Scope, another good one, looks at the strengths that you have and picks out the top ones, shows you ones that are, as they call, bubbling under, but it's really focusing on your individual strengths. And SDI, another great system that I've come across quite recently, where you get an individual profile, but it shows you your whole team on a map. And it actually shows you with SDI in favourable conditions, and then how your profile and your team profile shifts in unfavourable conditions. So you can see quite an interesting shift sometimes when you do that with a group. Again, it's only ever a tool. DISC, D-I-S-C, DISC is another one, which is all about what the team profile looks like when you've done your individual tests. Useful individually, but really good when you can see those as a whole and see what the makeup of your team is like in the round. So those are a few tools that I really like. I'll talk a lot more about these. I think I might do some individual videos, but it's an important thing to remember with all of these. As I said, number one, they are just a tool. They're just a tool. They are not absolute. You can't make every decision you're going to make based on these tools, but they're really useful to help. And once you start to develop this level of insight, if it's something you've never done before, you'll be really surprised about how that can feed into your thinking and certain decisions with aspects of your business. They are only a tool. The second thing is, when they show you the areas that you are really good at, as I said, I don't ever really look at areas you're not so strong at as weaknesses. Those are areas you're not as strong. We can always become a bit better at something or manage an area where we're not so skilled. If you do a strength too much, if somebody is, in one of the systems profiles them as an excellent speaker, an excellent networker, they're likely to be quite extroverted. Sometimes we have to have the self-awareness to dial that back a bit, because if we do it too much, it becomes overwhelming, it becomes off-putting or threatening to other people. So self-awareness comes into it as well. but learning to make sure that your strengths don't become weaknesses. Again, I'll probably speak about this a little bit more in the future. So there you go, a whistle stop through some of the tools that I've used that I quite like. Some thoughts around how you might use those for individuals within the team, and then to understand the team makeup with those tools, particularly Belbin, particularly SDI, particularly DISC. I would say Belbin and DISC are probably the two detailed ones around team makeup that I know. SDI does some of that and does it in quite an interesting and unique way. Myers-Briggs, StrengthScope, both really good for individual profiles, but you can always, of course, plot those on a team map and see who you've got. So just a few thoughts there. Again, as ever, I hope that that's useful. I'll follow this up with some more detailed videos in the future about individual systems and other aspects of personality profiling, because I find it personally interesting. But also it's such an important and clever tool to help your team to do the work you need them to do better in the future. So thanks very much for listening. Do, as ever, please check out the website. Please like and subscribe to the video, and I will speak to you really soon. Take care. Bye-bye.